In 5.7c, we're going to talk about perpendicular equations. So lines that are perpendicular have slopes that are opposite signs and reciprocals. So let's look at a few examples of how to create lines that are perpendicular to another. So if we look at number 1, this side here gives us our first equation. And the directions say to write the equation in slope-intercept form of a line that is perpendicular to our given line and passes through our given point. So if our original equation is right here, this means our original slope, I'm going to call that M1, is 9 over 11. Now when we did parallel lines, we could just use that same slope in our new equation. But now if we want a line that's perpendicular, we need to take the opposite reciprocal. So my new slope, I'm going to call it M2. My second equation for my slope is going to be the reciprocal, so I'm going to flip it over. It's going to be 11 over 9, and it's going to be opposite, so that means it's going to be a negative. So now I have my new slope, and I'm told this point right here, my x comma y, this is for my second equation, my number 2 equation. So now I have this information, I can plug that into my slope-intercept form to try and figure out what my b is going to be. So my y is 8, my m is negative 11 over 9, my x is negative 9, and I'm trying to find my b. Okay, so now I get 8 equals negative 11 ninths times a negative 9 gives me a positive 11. To get rid of that positive 11, I'm going to subtract 11 from both sides of my equation. I get negative 3 equals b. So now I have my b, I have my slope, I can write my final equation, y equals m x plus b. Okay, let's look at another example. Number 2, again, I have my original equation. This is my first line, and the slope of my first line is negative 1 over 7. Now, if I want to find my m of my new equation, if it's going to be perpendicular, that means I have to take the opposite reciprocal. So I'm going to flip it over. It's going to be 7 over 1. And since it was negative, that means it's going to become positive. So now I have my new slope. I have my xy point for my number 2 equation. And now I'm going to plug that in to solve for b. So if my y equals mx plus b, I get negative 5 equals m, which is 7 over 1, x, which is 2, plus b. That's what I'm trying to find. So now I get negative 5 equals 14 plus b. Minus 14 on both sides. Negative 5 minus 14 is a negative 19. And that is equal to my b. So now I have my b is a negative 19, my m is 7. So I can write my new equation, which is y equals 7x plus b. And that is my final answer. This equation of a line is perpendicular to my other equation. Okay, one more example. This time, my original equation right here is not solved for y. So I first need to solve that equation for y. So I'm going to rewrite it over here. 3x minus 5y equals 2. Remember, when we get y by itself, we need to get rid of everything else away from y. We want to get everything else on the right side of my equation, of my equal sign there. So to do that, I got to start with what's furthest away from y. If I look, my 3x is furthest away from y on this side. I want to move that whole term, so if I have a positive 3x, I'm going to subtract 3x from both sides. Okay, 3x minus 3x is 0, so I'm just left with a negative 5y on this side. On this side, I have a negative 3x and a positive 2. Now, my last step, I'm going to divide both sides by a negative 5. I get y is equal to negative 3 divided by a negative 5 is 3/5 x. And a positive 2 divided by a negative 5 is a negative 2/5. Now I can see what my slope is. So if my original slope in this equation is 3/5, I'm going to go back up here to the top. This means my new slope is going to be the reciprocal. So I'm going to flip it over. And I'm going to make it the opposite sign. So since it was positive, it's going to become negative. Now I have my x and my y for my number 2 equation. I can plug this in. Y is 0. My m is negative 5/3. My x is negative 1. And I'm trying to figure out what my b is. Negative 5/3 times a negative 1 is a positive 5/3. Now if I want to move that 5/3 to the other side, if I have a positive 5/3, I'm going to subtract 5/3 from both sides. Do that, I get negative 5/3 is equal to b. Now I have my b, I have my m. I can write my final equation, y equals m x plus b. And that is my final answer. That equation is perpendicular to the one they originally gave me.